All right. Welcome back to the Better Everyday podcast, where we are unlocking our best self one episode at a time. My name is David Garcia, and this is my beautiful wife, Grace Garcia. How are you, Grace?
A little tired.
Tired? Okay. I was expecting you to be like, oh, I'm good.
I'm good and tired.
Yeah? Anything else?
No.
No?
How are you?
There you go. I'm okay. I told you, and I've told like one or two other people, but like I've been pretty annoyed this first half of this year. Like nothing is bad, but what has annoyed me is like the constant like sickness after sickness after sickness. Like this year I feel like it's been nonstop getting sick. Like nonstop. I feel like it's been back to back. I think I've been good for like a week right now, maybe two. We recently had like a stomach bug out of nowhere. And the funny thing about that stomach bug was Araya got it first. Then Elijah got it. And then you got it. No. It was Araya. Then it was you.
Then me.
Then it was Elijah. And you were sitting there waiting for me to get sick.
No, I wasn't.
Oh,
it was
100%.
I just thought it was inevitable.
And I honestly thought like, okay, like there's no way, like 3 out of 4, like this thing's something contagious. There's no way I'm going to be able to like run away from it. And it was like 3 days after you all three got sick and I hadn't gotten sick. And I'm like, oh, like things are changing. Things are turning around here. Cause like, honestly, I've been pretty fed up. Like it messes with like my training. It messes just, with my tiredness and all that stuff. Like it's just been messing with me. And so I'm like, I ran away, done. And all of a sudden, boom. Like, what was it, like on a Tuesday or something like that? I don't remember when it was, but like it just at night, bam, it hit me. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like seriously?
Yeah.
Thank God that it wasn't as bad as like you guys. Like you had it pretty bad. The kids didn't have it too bad. I mean, especially Elijah's more like emotional and more like he feels everything. So he was suffering through all of his throw-ups and he's like, when is this over? I remember telling him, you're only going to do it 5 because I think you threw up 5 times. Araya threw up 5 times. And then I told him, I'm like, just mentally prepare. It's going to be 5 times. But once you hit 5 times, you're done. And he hit 6 and he just looks at me like, dude, you told me only 5 times. And then he hit 7. He's like just crying. And that's one thing that we've talked about as well, just like when you're mentally prepared for something. And that's why I was telling him there's only 5 times. And when you're mentally prepared for something, like it's all like it's not all good, but like you're more prepared for it. So it's not like, oh my gosh, like my world's coming down, right? But it's when you're not prepared. So when he hit like 6 and 7, he wasn't ready for that. And that's when he like really started just like, I'm over this. But the point of what I'm saying is like, I've been pretty fed up with being sick. And I'm over it. I'm annoyed about it. I'm just like, and the thing is like, okay, I don't eat terribly. Especially in the beginning of the year, I feel like I was eating more healthier than I am right now. I'm not eating that healthy right now, but the beginning of the year, I was eating much healthier. I've been taking my multivitamins, been taking multivitamins. I've been taking magnesium. I've been taking vitamin K and D, and I think it's 3 things or 4 things that I take. I've been using electrolytes now, so now I'm hydrating with electrolytes. Like I'm trying to like stay on top of it. I'm like, okay, like I'm doing everything possible to keep my immune system good. I try to sleep, you know me. I try to sleep as much as I can. But I've been getting sick. And so that's the frustrating part. It's like I'm doing everything possible to try to stay healthy, but it's just been bam, 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 bam. And this year I've been getting things like I usually don't get. Like I've never had pink eye in my life, and then I got pink eye. And I was wearing these stupid goggles like for a week, trying to like to protect people, and people were like making fun of me at work and at church and stuff. And I'm, I put up with it, but I mean, still, the point that I'm trying to say is like I've been pretty fed up with it. And then one of these days I started thinking about it, and I'm like, I'm really fed up with this. But I'm like, is my life really that bad? And like, then I started thinking about perspective and how easy we can get to the point where something might, like, I guess we can say attacking us, like illnesses are attacking us, or like maybe it's not even illnesses, but it's different things like financial things attacking us over and over again. And then we could easily just be like, yo, my life sucks. My life sucks. Like, I'm over this. I'm trying my best and it keeps coming back. Like, I'm trying my best and I keep getting hit. You know, like, what am I supposed to do? Do I just give up? Like, do I just, whatever, I'll just be unhealthy and still get sick? At least I'm quote unquote enjoying myself with like food, you know, like, and so I was thinking about it and I'm like, when I really think about my life and I'm like, I don't have it that bad. Like, I have these illnesses, whatever, right? But at the same time, I'm like, I have a beautiful family. I have 2 kids. I have a really good job. You have a really good job. We make pretty good money. Like, we've been tackling your debt. Like, we've been doing all these things, right? And then when you really think about it, well, when I really think about it, I'm like, okay, it's not that bad, you know? But I always say, and I think I've said it on the podcast before, like, it's all about perspective and it's all about focus. My big thing is always about focus. Like, you look through a microscope, the wideness of your focus is not wide at all. It's very just like pinpointed. But when you pull your head back away from the microscope, you see a much bigger picture, right? You see a grand scheme of things, right? And so I feel like a lot of times, I call it the box. Like, when you put yourself in a box of like, I have this illness and I got over this and then I got this thing. Like, I think it was 3 different colds in a row that I had at some point. Then I had some like throat infection and then the pink eye and then the stomach thing. And like, it's just been nonstop. Right. And I can easily be in that box and be like, yo, this sucks. Like, I'm over this. Like, I feel like there's no break. Like, I'm trying to do things right. I'm trying to work out and I'm a big baby. Like, when it comes to illnesses, I'm a huge baby. Like, when I feel any sort of like, oh, my little scratch in my throat, I should take it easy and not go to the gym, or take it easy and not go for a run. Right. Like, and so like it messes with me. And so when I'm in that box, all I see is all these things piling up and I'm like, I can't catch a break. Like, I just need to be good for a while. Like, just give me a break. Right. But when you're outside the box, usually you get that outside of the box perspective when you are not in the box. So it's somebody else. It could be if I open up to you and you tell me like, dude, you don't even have it that bad. Like, yeah, you're getting sick. Like, hey, like, maybe go to the doctor, go check it out. But in reality, your life is not that bad, you know? But I could be playing that song like, my life sucks, you know? And so my thing has always been about perspective. It's been about focus. And so the other thing that I've talked to you about, and I've mentioned it to a couple of our friends, is because it ties in with what I'm saying is, I may be overgeneralizing it, but I feel like a good amount of humans run like this, which is we complain about the things that we don't have, but we don't appreciate what we do have. So in my instance, let's say I was complaining, I don't have my health. I'm not in the greatest of health. Like, I keep getting sick over and over again. And I wasn't really taking, like, when I'm in that moment, I'm like not taking in like, okay, but what do I have that's great? What do I have that I'm grateful for? You know? And so, even just a side note, the thing that I feel bad about too is sometimes we've had plans and we've had to cancel them because we're sick. And I feel like our friends sometimes are just like, yo, these people are lying. Like, they can't always be sick. But this year it's been that way. But I guess something that we can talk about, because I feel like there's a good amount of people that probably are going through something similar, right? Maybe it's not illnesses, but maybe it's marital problems that keep coming up, or financial problems that keep coming up. And in the financial aspect, I've actually felt that a little bit as well. Like, I mean, how long have me and you been talking about a house? And it's been more of my thing than it's been yours, because you've been straight up just like, why do you want a house? Just because the rest of the people are buying houses, or that's what society tells you that is like success, right? But like, how long have you been talking about it? Like, it's been years.
Yeah.
And last year I thought this was going to be the year that we were going to buy a house, and then your student loans finally came knocking on the door, and we're like, all right, let's deal with it. And then our plans got pushed like a year or two more. And in the financial aspect, I've been feeling a little bit burnt out as well. And I'm just like, hey, like, because it's been 2 years now that we don't have like a vacation. We have like little getaways or whatever, but like nothing like that we've been wanting to do. And I'm just like, okay, I'm ready to get this over with and relax for like 2 months and then book like a nice vacation. And that's what I told you that we were going to do, right? But again, the stories might be different, but the situations are similar, like where people are getting fed up with like, what the heck? Like this keeps coming up. Like it keeps knocking on my door. Like I just can't catch a break. I want this to be over. And there's like, is there like a light at the end of the tunnel? Like, and so this would be a good conversation in regards to like, how do you believe somebody can stay grateful through that season? Because it's hard to be grateful. And what I mean by gratefulness is like what I was saying, like all I'm focusing on is this illness that keeps coming up. But when I finally pull back, it's like, oh, there's so much more that is going good in my life. But it's just I'm so focused on that one thing.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone has lived life just so joyful, so grateful without having gone through a hard season.
Mm-hmm.
You probably need a hard season to give you that perspective. Because if you don't have a hard season, if you don't have those difficulties, you take life for granted. This is my opinion. And so when you have, how you say, those sicknesses, there are moments in our humanity when we dwell on the negative, when we look at as a fact, right? Like this is not how it's meant to be, or doesn't feel good. This isn't what I want. And it's up to us if we make those negative parts of it or those statements be so big in our mind that it consumes our thoughts, it consumes, or it takes away our joy, it steals from us. Or if we just say what it is, like how we've talked about before, feel our emotions, validate it, but then look at what really matters, which there's so many things that we are to be grateful for. Mm-hmm. Salvation, our family. But I don't think, even the Bible says, like, what produces steadfastness and faithfulness and all of those fruit is the hard times, is the difficult times.
Okay, so right now I feel like there's a little bit of a battle in American culture. Especially after like this whole Andrew Tate thing, this movement or whatever. I feel like there's a couple of men in society that have a position of influence that has been kind of fighting back towards the whole a man that feels his feelings, that stops, that just like, hey, it's time for a break. You know, like I need to relax. I need to just whatever, you know. But these people of influence, like let's say like an Andrew Tate, like a Dana White from the UFC, they're just very bold men, right? They're the types that are just like, no, just buckle up and go, right? And honestly, in complete honesty, I do subscribe to that in regards to just men like, dude, like we gotta just go and give it our all, you know, like buckle down and go, like life is gonna happen, right? And you're kind of like saying, hey, the bad times is what produces all the good stuff, right? But it doesn't say, hey, during those bad times, take a break, go seek counseling, take it easy, stop doing so much work, relax. No, it just says the bad times produces this. And so you could see it from a perspective of, yeah, the bad times are going to hit. There's no escaping it. We've said it here before. Like, there's no escaping the bad times. So what are you going to do when the bad times come? And some men prescribe to just buckle up and go. Like, what are you going to do? Like, what other option do you really have? Like, and we've talked about it, like the easier path and the harder path, right? But again, that is also another debate. Is the harder path to stop, relax, seek counseling, seek mentorship, don't buckle down, like, or else you're going to crack or you're going to break? Or is the harder path just buckling down and going? Like, and then we also start going into the debate of what is the role of a man, because under these men's thought process, it's a man's role is to buckle down and go. Like, I mean, everyone knows that men aren't really the feeling type. We're not really the emotional type, you know? And we've talked about it in the last couple of years. There's been like a movement happening where it's like, hey guys, you guys need to start feeling more. You guys need to start being more vulnerable and being open. And that's all fine and dandy. But like, for us to completely stop and just be like, hey, I feel sad. And this is why I feel sad. And I want to talk about it for a couple of months and let me process. And then maybe after I'll think about going back to buckling down. So what's your thought process on that?
I think it's healthy to process. And in a sense, as you were talking, I wonder if it's a facade of ego of, oh, I'm looking strong, but behind that is someone who's scared to look weak, someone who's scared, which at the end of the day turns your whole strong facade into like a house of cards. Because, yeah, I wonder what men like the ones you mentioned, how they would look at David and say, okay, stop crying, stop whining, like, just, all right, it's tough, just keep going. But I mean, he wrote so many Psalms, meaning he paused, he didn't give up, he didn't stop conquering, he didn't stop fleeing those difficult situations that he was in. But writing Psalms, not only is he just like throwing up and just writing whatever comes to mind. I think there was a lot of, before even putting pen to paper, quill to scroll, analyzing, like, what is it that I'm feeling? What is it that I'm going through? Like, he was very in touch with his emotions. Same thing with Elijah. He wanted to commit suicide. He was at that point where he said, it's not even worth living. And God told him, why don't you go take a nap, eat some food, like, calm down. And so I don't think it's wrong to be strong and to keep going forward. But I do think in this, no, a man shouldn't feel, I just feel like it's just an ego. It's a pride, which in turn makes you more weak. Because there's so much strength in vulnerability. There's so much strength in being in touch with your emotions and say, like, that's not easy. Like, what am I feeling? Why do I feel this? Like, those are not easy questions to ask. I don't think processing your emotions has to look like a girl or has to be in, let me stop exactly what I'm doing. I don't think it stops you in your purpose or in your mission or whatever you were trying to do, but it is going to make you pause and, if anything, be more, am I heading the right direction? Is this healthy? I think that's necessary.
Yeah, because I mean, I get with the whole David thing, but I also think while you were saying that, I'm like, did he ever stop though? He felt what he felt, but it always like started off like, God, you're amazing. My life sucks. God, you're amazing. And to the way that I see it is like, I'm doing what I got to do. I feel these things. I'm doing what I got to do. Like, it wasn't like, hey, let's just chill out. Like, when he did chill out, the one time that I remember that he chilled out was when he wasn't going to war anymore. And then what happened?
I know, but a lot of the times he was running away from Saul because he didn't want to kill him. I wonder if people would have saw that as weak. Like, why are you not just a man and fighting him?
The only rebuttal that I would say to that is like, he took his chance. He cut that little piece of cloth and he was like, I could have got you, buddy.
Yeah.
But he
But
didn't.
he still never.
Honestly, I think from a man's perspective and a man's pride perspective, that scenario right there, him doing that is a bigger blow than actually killing Saul. It's like, I got so close to you. You didn't notice me. I cut this off of you. You didn't notice it.
Yeah.
And now I'm waving it in front of you. Like, and I'm not saying that was a posture that David had, but like in a man's perspective, that pride, just like, hey, that's a killer right there. Like, okay. But what I'm trying to say, and we do have female audience as well, I believe from the analytics I've checked, it's like 50-50, right? But the whole point of this conversation, I believe, is just like, how do we continue in that in that momentum of gratefulness, right? You were like, okay, the hard times are going to come and you have to feel what you have to feel. But I still feel like, again, if you want to talk about David, doing what I'm doing, grateful, awesome, God, you're awesome. My life sucks, God, you're awesome, right? It was all in that same one chapter.
Alexa just went off and we didn't even talk to her.
Oh my goodness. So he just kept going, right? Like and so what do you say to that? Like how do you continue that gratefulness? I believe that, and that's part of just, okay, let's paint it in a different picture. Buckling down is now staying consistent with gratefulness. Mm-hmm. Is that possible? Yes. Is that your responsibility? 100%. But like what I'm trying to say is like, I gave my example of like illnesses, like, oh my gosh. And I could just sit there and be like, my life sucks. Like, how am I getting like sick all the time? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, now I'm not able to like work out. And because I don't work out, I don't feel like I'm going to eat healthy, because why even bother or whatever. And because of that, now I'm getting moody because I'm just like not happy with what I'm doing with my life. Now I'm not happy, just with how my life is going. So my life sucks. This is ridiculous. Like, you can easily spiral into that, especially like having something back to back, right? And so how do we stay grateful? Because again, should we do it? Yes. Is it our responsibility? Yes. Can we do it? Yes. But I believe you have to be intentional. And when I say intentional, like waking up and being like, what am I grateful for today? And there's a lot of things that we take for granted. Like we might say it in our prayers, but like, do we really feel it? Like a lot of people wake up and, God, thank you for another day of life. That sentence right there, I feel like doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people. Like it's just like, unless you've been through a life-threatening situation, I feel like most people say that just for the sake of saying it. Like, and that's just my point of view, right? But having like that list of gratefulness and it not being a check mark. Because again, somebody can hear me and take it from almost like a legalistic standpoint. Oh, let me just make a checklist. All these things that I'm grateful for. But if you wake up and you just read those things and you're not really like being intentional about being grateful for each one of those things, like it's just something that you're checking off. And if you're checking off, you're not feeling it. And if you're not feeling it, it's not penetrating. If it's not penetrating, like, what are you doing? And so like, what do you feel? How do you feel like somebody should or could be grateful all the time? Or do you think it's even possible? Because you might not even think it's possible.
I think, yeah, as humans, I think there is going to be moments where we like have relapses or we start thinking of the negative. But we are called to take captive any thought and to bind it. And so those thoughts are going to come, yes, but it's our job to not continue to entertain those ideas, to make them grow, to take root into our mind. And so it is possible. Then there's many tools, things that you can do. Some of the things I think we have control over. Others, I think it's God's grace. for example, for me, if someone were to ask me, like, what do you do or what do you think helps? For sure, how you said, be intentional with prayer, like starting off your day with God. I've noticed in my life ever since I started doing it in January, which I'm a little embarrassed to say I started in January, but I always used excuses like, well, I'm praying to God. Like, why does it matter? But giving him the first of my day and being so intentional of like writing it down and going back to the day before and seeing God, or was I like being intentional? You've said you see me at school and it's like completely different, my viewpoint. And other things I've been doing is when I do complain, because it's normal, like traffic is bad. Yeah, that sucks. Like that's just, no one's gonna say, no, traffic is amazing. It gives me time to, like, no, it sucks. But I always try to then write like 2-3 things, like the other perspective.
Yeah.
So let me just give like a practical example. If I say I have this deadline and I'm so stressed and it sucks, and if I just like complain how bad it is, I let myself complain, I let myself feel, and then I say, okay, but you know what? If I didn't have this deadline, I'd be wanting to apply for this. And I'm blessed that I got this opportunity to even do this assignment. And then if it's going to be a paid deadline or whatever, like I'm grateful for that. So just let myself complain, but then immediately write 2 or 3 things that I'm grateful for, or say them. That's just, I think, mentally doing something to your brain, of like rewiring your brain so that it's not just negative going in there, but your brain knows, okay, you said it, positive now, and you're training it.
Yeah, you're creating new patterns.
Other thing is, it's so contagious, whether we are contagious as human beings. So whether people around you and you are complaining, it's just easier to start complaining. And so if you surround yourself with people who constantly complain, like I think we all know someone, like they complain and then you kind of not automatically start complaining. Like, wait, I'm complaining more than usual.
Yeah.
Versus people who are positive and you're just like, it makes you, when you complain, you feel bad and you're like, oh my goodness, like this isn't the atmosphere.
Okay, let me interject a little bit, because what I hear you say is do an evaluation of the people surrounding you, seeing if they're complainers or if they're positive people. But, okay, that's very good. Very, very good. But what if somebody per se goes, all right, I'm going to eliminate all the negative people out of my life. I notice that these people right here, this list of like 5-10 people, they do nothing but complain. And I find myself just jumping in there, right? I'm going to stick with positive people. But here's the other thing where I think, and you can elaborate on my thought if you feel like you should. But if you surround yourself just with positive people, then I feel like you go into that circle of, is this real or not? And what I mean by that is when you go, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm great. Everything's great. Big smile on my face. Nothing's bad. Everything's good. Don't worry. God is good. My life is good. Everything's going to turn out fine. And I think I believe that you should surround yourself with real people.
Yeah.
And what I mean by real is like a David. Because I fully agree with you in regards to like, okay, feel what you feel. Like bring it out to the light. This is what I feel. It doesn't mean that you're stopping. It doesn't mean that you're slowing down. It just means, hey, I'm going to be open. And if you want to hear me and you want to help me or pray for me or encourage me or just hug me, you want to kiss me, whatever it is, like, thank you. But I need to surround myself with people that are real as well in regards to, okay, how are you doing? Oh, like this is going on in my life. The kids are getting on my nerves, or this kid keeps saying these things, or my wife this, or my job that. But here's the things that I'm doing to, counteract that, to work on it, to go through it, to process that. And I believe everything's going to be fine in the end. I feel like that's real.
Yeah.
Right? Like you go from, I'm grateful for this. This is what's, not that great in my life, but I'm believing for better. And here's what I'm doing. I believe that part is very important for me personally, is not just, oh, I'm believing for a better tomorrow. But if you're not doing anything for that better tomorrow, then, what are you hoping for? Like, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
So I believe it's very important for you. I'm hoping for better tomorrow, and I'm doing this to make it happen. You know, whether that's praying, fasting, doing practical things, doing tangible things. Like, but here's the work that I'm putting in, and I'm praying and having faith that God's going to do the rest. Right?
Yeah, for sure. I think we have seen kind of like the extreme opposites of people, where they complain so much that it drains you, and you feel like, oh, that was an exhausting conversation. And there's people I've met who are like fake always happy, and you're just like, oh, like this is, I don't like this.
Yeah.
So that's not beneficial either. And I think Jesus is a perfect example of when he was mad or even sad, he's not putting a fake smile on his face and saying all is well. Like, he's in touch with his emotions. He's human, but he's not being like pessimistic and complaining like, oh, you guys suck, the whole world sucks, like all this.
Yeah.
So there is, and that's one of the things I was going to say too. So being intentional, speaking to God, being grateful, not making where everything we say is negative, but if we do counteract it with positive, surrounding yourself with real, like positive people, optimistic people. And then I think serving. I think when you serve people, I don't know if this is going to sound bad, but you realize I don't have it bad. Like when you just put yourself out in the world and just truly look at others' hearts, other situation, someone always is going to have it worse than you. And that just brings into perspective. And when you serve them, look at them, not just like, oh, I know of them. But if you truly like care, where you open up, they open up to you and you open up to them, you can't help but feel for them. And then their issue becomes so much more like you start praying for them, and you start like it changes your perspective on what really matters.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those things kind of help. But also how I said, so those are things that we can control. Those are things that we don't have an excuse to not be able to do. But I also believe that it's part of God's grace too. And what I think of that is, I think I mentioned it before, where hopefully you've sown the seeds, your family has sown the seeds, you've like have a foundation in your life. Because how I said, we're human, we're bound to go through seasons, we're bound to like things to slip up. We're not going to have every single perfect thought, do every single perfect thing. Where if you get in a mindset where you're just like, I give up, like despair, and you feel too weak that you can't even move on and you give up, like God's grace just comes to the rescue. Like there's points in my life where, 2 points in my life where I felt like so low, and I felt like I don't even care. Like I don't have any strength to lift me up. And it's only through God's grace. There's nothing that I did to get me out of that hole. Like I have no credit to take, but just God coming and like rescuing me. And so there are going to be moments where I'm not saying like, oh, always wait for that and don't take any, accountability and don't do anything on your part. But I believe God's grace also has a lot to do with it. There's moments where he just confronts me with the word or his word through someone else that really makes me think, and it's like, oh my goodness. And if that person didn't say that word in that specific time, I don't know what would happen. Like it was that kind of put me back into perspective, into focus. Like, what am I doing with my life? Like, this is what really matters. And there's times where, how I said, it's just so difficult, and where I'm such at the bottom of the hole that it's like when I want to give up, and I'm just like, David, I don't care about our marriage. I don't care about anything. Like when we hit rock bottom, where it's just like, there's nothing but to go up, and he kind of like just scoops us up, like, let's get out of here. And yeah, there are practical steps we did, like we have to take, but I think it's his hand reaching out to us that makes that initial pull.
So you said that there's things that we can control, and you also said that there's things that we can't control. So are you saying that when we hit that rock bottom, that was something that we couldn't control?
Oh no, I think what
are the things, okay, fine. Here's a better way of saying this question. What are things that you feel like you can't control?
Well, when, like in the first scenario, was I couldn't control what there was this professor who said something that just like stuck to me. I wasn't controlling him, and him like, let me have him say this so that I can kind of like snap out of it, or like have him say it so that I can focus on what matters. So in that case, I feel like God was speaking to me through him.
Okay, so because the way that you said there's things that you can control and things that you can't, the way that I interpreted that was that the things that you can't control is like spiraling all the way to the bottom. Like, oh my gosh, I couldn't control it. Like,
no. I'm
my
saying,
emotions just took the best of me, and I just.
No, I'm saying the getting out of it.
Okay.
Like, I put myself there, and like, you give up. I said, you give up. You feel like it doesn't even matter anymore. And so you're not even thinking of a way out, but it's just God's hand. That's the thing you can't control. That just takes you out of there. And you're just like, if it was in my thought process, I would have still been there. But it's his grace that took me out. And I wouldn't have been able to do that on my own.
Then would you say that if that moment, that uncontrollable moment, where let's say, for example, you said that your professor spoke and you felt like God's speaking to you, you said that was the grace of God. What if a moment like that never happens? Do you feel like that person doesn't have the grace of God? And follow-up question, what does a person like that do?
No, I think God is always speaking to us. And that's where I say it's a mix of God's grace and us, because God is always going to like speak to us. But that's where I prefaced with saying we have to put the foundational work. And that's why it's so important, because if we don't have that foundation and God speaks to us and we're so bitter and cold, I could have just ignored it. I'm like, no, I'm gonna stay in this hole. Like, I don't care. Like, and he could have spoken another way. It didn't have to be through that pastor. It can be through my Bible. It can be through a song. It could have been through another person, my friend. It could have been through you, whatever. But because I put that foundation of knowing who God is, did that work so that when I'm in the hole, my heart isn't so cold. The doors aren't completely shut. Because I think you can easily say, God could still speak to you and you could say no. Like, you have that right. You have that free will to say, no, God, I don't want to. But that's why I said it's important. It's so important to have that relationship, that foundation with God, because you don't know when you're going to get into that moment. And that's God's grace, and that foundation that you have is the only thing that will sustain you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I do feel like when you get to that spiral, though, I think there are moments like, let's say, for example, the prodigal son, right? He had a pretty good life, still decided, hey, give me my share of the inheritance. I'm bouncing, had his little fun, hit rock bottom. And he himself chose, hey, you know what? I'm going to go back. You know, and we've talked about it in past episodes where like sometimes we got to get to that moment of desperation where like something's got to change. And a lot of times when we get to that moment, it's something in me's got to change, you know? And I used to use an analogy, like, especially when we want God to move in our life, God to show up. I use the analogy of like, we're sitting at a bus stop waiting for the bus to show up. And the bus is like the representation of like God showing up, right? And your destination is whatever. Let's call it the mall. Right. And I want to go to the mall because I really want to get the latest pair of sneakers. Right. Really want those really bad. Been praying for them. Sitting at the bus stop waiting for the bus to show up. Hours go by, bus is not showing up. I'm still sitting on that seat. The mall's, let's say, 10 blocks away. Could I walk it? 100%. But I feel like a lot of people, well, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but there are some people that stay on that bench waiting and waiting. And not only do they wait, but they complain like, God, what the heck? Why aren't you showing up? And maybe God's looking back at them like, bruh, it's 10 blocks. Just walk it. Like, how would you speak to that person on the bench? Like, because we're talking about like kind of moments where God shows up. My professor spoke to me. This person I had no idea who they were, or they had no idea who I was, spoke to me, and it really touched me or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you speak to that person that's just like sitting there twiddling their thumbs? And this is just my like more brusco way of seeing it, because I'm just not the guy that sits on the bench, right? I'm like, okay, I'll just walk the 10 blocks. But I see like the people sitting there like twiddling their thumbs, like waiting, like, and they run out of patience and they go, God, what the heck? Like, you gonna show up? Like, I see you showing up for Tom, and I see you showing up for Mike, and I see you showing up for Grace. Like, when are you gonna show up for me? You know? Like, what would you say to those people? Okay, let me put it more like more real now. They're sitting at that bench, and they're waiting for God to show up in their marriage. They're waiting for God to show up in their finances. They're waiting for God to show up in their depression. They're waiting for God to show up in their health. They're waiting for all these things, and they're sitting there waiting. And in their head, it's faith. They're doing all the right things by sitting there. Like, they're praying, they're fasting, but they're sitting there. What do you say to those people?
Well, I think there's a difference between a person sitting there and kind of what you were saying in the first half, questioning God and kind of like it's a complaint, versus sitting there and having faith. That's how I see that as, like, you were kind of meshing them together, but I see it as two different scenarios. The first, like,
what does the Bible say? Faith without
works is dead. But the first time you were saying, like, they were sitting there questioning God, because the Israelites, they were putting in the work. They were physically heading towards the promised land. They got out of Egypt with their belongings that God told them, with all the gold that God told them, and they're heading towards the promised land. Like, that's works. Where they failed was in their complaint and not seeing God how they wanted to see God.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd tell people who would say, like, oh, where's God in my finances? Where's God in my marriage? It's like, he's there. Where are you not seeing him? Perspective. Because I said, oh, why is God not feeding us? The manna. Oh, okay, but we don't want the manna. Oh, the quail. Oh, but now we want water. Strike the rock. Like, they complain about every single thing.
Okay.
So it's like, God is there, just not how you want him to be. Can you write down all the moments where he's at? But because that's works.
And this is where I'm trying to get to as well, is like the other thing that I was saying is, us as humans, we complain about what we don't have. And we aren't grateful for what we do have. 100%. And like, if we were just grateful for what we do have, we could see God in our situation.
100%.
Like, that person waiting at the bus stop is like, God, how come you haven't showed up in XYZ way? When God's like, I've given you the health and I've given you the skills, the knowledge, the talent to be able to go out and go find what you're trying to look for. Like, again, like, let's say it's marriage. Like, God, why haven't you showed up in my marriage? Homeboy, I've given you the means. I've given you a job. I've given you intelligence. I've given you knowledge. I've given you resources around you. Go out and use them. Mm. You know, like, I think it was TD Jakes that said something like, a man once was asking for a chair, a wooden chair from God, and God's like, I gave you a tree. Make the chair. Like, I've given you the tools. Go out and do it, you know? And I feel like there are some people that are just like sitting there, in my eyes, doing nothing. But, you know, they may be praying and maybe having faith. But like, physically, like, with the tools that they've been given, doing nothing and just sitting there twiddling their thumbs, like, and I also feel like they put God in a box as well. Like, you showed up like this before, you're going to show up like that exactly again. And that may not be the case. I don't know how accurate this is, so correct me if I'm wrong. But I heard a man say once, I don't think it's many times or any times that God perform the same miracle twice. Like, and the very basic example that he gave was, how many times did you see a group of people go around a city 7 times, blow their trumpets, shout, and the city came down? You know, and so but I feel like we put God in a box. Like, if he did show up, we have the faith that he's going to show up like this. And we put God in a box when God is so much greater than that, right? Like, he can show up in any way. And that's why we always kind of say, like, he could speak to us. He can through books, through people, through prayer, through so many different ways, and we have to be open to it. But just people put them in a box, and it's really frustrating because they just sit there like, I'm waiting. And God's over here knocking in some different way, like, hey, I'm waiting for you. You know, but it's frustrating and it's annoying, not for the sake of the people, but like to know that us as human beings are like that we complain about what we don't have and we don't appreciate what we do have. And I feel like when we do appreciate what we do have, when we can really just like tap into that, our life, our demeanor, our heart, our mind changes. And I feel like even like chemically, like scientifically, like the chemicals in our bodies like changes drastically, I think. When we could really tap in. I got to a point, I don't know if it was earlier this year or last year. I remember telling Nate, you guys know Nate now, that I'm like, dude, I'm at a point where I'm grateful for the fact that I can be grateful. It's like this, like, what's that movie called, Inception, where it's like a dream within a dream within a dream with a dream. I'm like, I feel like I'm like that. Like, I'm grateful for being grateful. Like, that's crazy. But I did get to that point where I was just saying, God, like, thank you so much for even being in a relationship with me where I could say thank you. You know, like, do I deserve it? No, I don't. But you've allowed this connection between me and you, and like it really moved my heart, you know, and it's really special to be in that place. And it's so powerful. Like when we get to that point, it's just like, it's not a fake optimism. It's a real optimism of like, I know that things are going to be okay. I need to put in the work. And I also need to have my eyes open, my ears open, my heart open, my mind open, my soul open, my spirit open, my everything open as I walk in relationship with God. And I know that he's going to show up in some way, somehow. And I'm going to be able to give a testimony about the scenario where I'm at or where I was at. And it's so powerful when we get to that point. But it's hard, especially in the culture and society that we're in right now, where it's just, you hear about all these like groups forming and complaining about XYZ and like riots here and what's the peaceful protests and stuff like that. It's just like so many people just yelling and screaming like, we want this, and they're basically like, we want this because we don't have it. But it's like, if we all as just a general population could be much more grateful for what we have, like, I think a lot of things would change, you know, but it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. And that's why I brought this topic up, because I've been in low points this year, and like, you know, the illnesses, the finances sometimes is like up and down. It's like you know, we're getting things done, but at the same time, I'm like, yo, I'm tired. Like,
Yeah.
I want this to be over. I'm ready to just go on a vacation, and I'm ready to start saving for a house, and who knows when that's going to happen. Like, and you know, that could get worse with comparison as well. You know, like, oh, I see this other person buying a house, or some of my friends have 2 houses now. Like, I don't even have one. And, you know, again, there's so many avenues for you to become ungrateful and start complaining, you know? But there are times where I get in funks, like, and to be honest, I feel like I'm in a bit of a funk right now, and you kind of pointed it out one of these days. David, you're in a funk. And it's just like, and I was speaking to somebody today actually, and I was like, I know what is right. I know, like, it's just a matter of like, hey, I need to just gather all these things that I'm grateful for, I need to gather all these things, like, but sometimes it's hard. It is hard. And again, I could do what I know is right. But I'm just, for whatever reason, for whatever weird reason, I'm just like the type of person, if I don't truly feel it, like it's not genuine, like I'm just like, why am I going to do it? Like it's a waste of time, effort. It's a waste of breath. Like, and I remember, kind of side note, when we were in counseling, I remember the counselor was like, David, you need to give Grace compliments at least one time a day. And we would come back the next week. David, did you give her compliments every day? And I'd be like, no, I'm struggling. And she asked me like, why are you struggling? I'm like, she actually told me, I think before I even said it, she's like, it's because you don't feel like it's genuine. You feel like it's just like, you're just saying it for the sake of saying it. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. She's like, I don't care. Say it anyways. Because it's what you were saying earlier of what you're doing now in the mornings. Like if you think of one negative thought, say 3 on top. And what you're doing is creating new patterns for your life, new pathways for your brain, new habits. And she was basically like, just do it. And so maybe it's that I just need to do it. And it's hard for me because it's like, if it's not genuine, if it's not really like, I feel it, like I'm just, I guess, a feeler, I go off of my passions. But it is hard. And one of these days we were watching Chosen. I forget what episode it was, but it was season 3, I think it was. And it was showing the part where the woman with the blood issue was going through her process. And then she finally hears, oh, like Jesus is in town. And she finally is like, I'm going to push through, right? And if you haven't heard the story, so this woman has like this issue with blood. It's basically like, I don't know if it's gross to say or whatever, but it's like nonstop, like period, right? Or something like that. And so in that time, like she was seen as gross. She was exiled. She wasn't allowed to touch anybody or see anybody or whatever, right? So she was completely exiled. And it was like, 12 years, I think it was. She had seen doctors. She had gone through all these things. She if you really look at it, she'd put in the work. She tried to like get this fixed. And there was no other option. And so Jesus comes into town. She had heard about him. And she becomes that point of desperation where it's like, I don't care. Like, I got to go for it. And Jesus is being like crowded by the multitude. It's hard to get to him. But some way, somehow, she found a way. And she touched his garment, which is like a piece of his clothing. And she was healed. And what's beautiful about the way Chosen did it was, Jesus says what it says in the Bible, like, who touched me? And I think it was Peter was like, what are you talking about? You're being touched by like all the multitude, whatever. He's like, no, I felt a power come out of me. Who touched me? And then everyone kind of disperses. And in the scene, like she's just left there, like, and she's like, I just did it because I believed that, like you would heal me. And I believed like, I'm sorry. Like, I forget what she said, but she was just like, I'm sorry. Like she was just, she knew that she shouldn't have done it, but she needed to. She does it, and Jesus is just like, it's okay. And it's not just like in the scene that they made, it wasn't just like, it's okay, go. It was like, it's okay. I see you. I don't remember exactly the words that he said, but it was basically like, I see you. You've been going through it. You're not alone. I'm with you. I love you. And he just like embraced her. And I kind of like in that, when I saw that scene, it really like struck a chord in me because you know me, like I've always kind of had a heart for the underdog, right? And so as I was thinking about what we were going to talk about today, I've been thinking about it for like a week or so, and I'm just like, how many people are in a similar situation as I am? Obviously, it could be way worse because I'm just like illnesses come and go. I'm going to be fine. I don't have anything serious, right? But there's how many people are out there like going through marital situations, going through abuse, verbal, physical, going through drug addictions, going through illnesses, going through financial situations where they feel like there is nothing that I could do, like nothing works, like there is nothing that works and I'm tired. Like I'm done with this. Like there's no more strength in my body. There's no more brain cells in my brain. Like I've done everything possible. There is no other solution. And I kind of like that scene in Chosen, I kind of like put it together with this. It's like, if you're listening to this and you're that person, I want you to know that you're not alone. There's other people going through it. People that you might think have it all together. They don't. They're going through it too. And there is a God that we can run to. There is Jesus that we can run to. And if we truly are at that point of desperation, I would encourage you to run to him, even if it seems impossible to get to him, even if it seems like you got to put in a lot of work or find a way, like run to him, because nobody will embrace you like he can embrace you. Nobody can love you like he can love you. And it was just, again, it was just so beautiful the way that they did it. Because it was like, you're not alone. And I like, if you really put yourself in that scenario, you can hear God saying that to us. Like, you're not alone. I see you. I see your struggles. I see that you're frustrated. You're annoyed. You're over it. But I'm here now. And everything's going to be okay. And your faith has healed you. You know, and so I just want to end with that. Like, have faith, run to God, be real, but be optimistic.
Yeah.
Know that there are better days ahead, you know? And that's something, honestly, that I myself have to embrace. Because, yeah, I've been going through these ups and downs and funks. And
that's the first step, and just owning it and recognizing it.
Yeah.
Being aware.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
I think that's good. Just recognizing that two things can be true at once. How you said, like, putting your part, but also running to God. Like, we're multifaceted. So just thinking one way is going to work. Like, I can't be vulnerable and share my feelings because it sounds like complaining. And I have to be optimistic all the time. Like, we're multifaceted. And how you said, running to Jesus, I think he will then teach us how to live as human and spirit.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we have to just always keep our hearts in check as well. Just knowing that us as humans, for whatever reason, we're wired that way, where we complain about what we don't have and we don't appreciate what we do have. And so be self-aware when we're getting to that point and just like kind of like stop it. Be like, hey, like, even if you have to talk to yourself out loud, like, yo, stop.
Yeah.
Like, you have so much to be grateful for. And again, kind of like what you're saying, like, you go out into the world and you see other people's situation, chances are you're going to be grateful for your situation. You don't have it that bad. You're just in a kind of self-made box. And so, yeah, we want to just encourage you guys with that positivity. We thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. That's episode 13. We've gone 13 weeks strong. And we appreciate the feedback that we got from episode 12. We know that you guys really like us having guests. We are waiting to book our next guests. We're just, the administrator is kind of just lacking it a little bit on booking the other guests. But we have great episodes lined up. And again, we thank you so much for the time that you guys take. We thank you so much for the feedback, for the likes, the shares, the comments. Yeah, this has been a great ride, and honestly, I'm grateful for this right here, like that we can do this, and I'm doing this with you, babe.
I love you.
So yeah, I love you. We love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
See ya.